Hey guys, tonight we're climbing into a scratchy straw mattress, clutching a hot brick for warmth, and falling asleep sometime after the cows settle. You wake up in the dark, not from a nightmare, but because that's what everyone does. Welcome to the strange, lopsided world of medieval sleep, where dreams mean something, beds aren't private, and sleep isn't a single stretch. Let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. The draft alone would give you pneumonia, and if that doesn't get you, the rats might. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing how far this sleepy little community reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crawl into bed just after nightfall, full belly or not, because night means danger. The fire's down to glowing coals. Your home, probably a one-room cottage, smells like smoke, sweat, and boiled onions. Chickens rustle in the corner. Somewhere under the floorboards, mice skitter. And just when you're finally drifting off, you'll be waking up again in a few hours. That's right. You don't sleep through the night. Not in 1350. Not if you're normal. Your night is split, first sleep and second sleep, with a chunk of dark silence in between. It's called segmented sleep, and it's not just theory. Letters, court records, even medical texts talk about first sleep ending around midnight, and second sleep starting about an hour or two later. So what do you do during this ghostly break in the night? Well, whatever you want. Some folks light a candle and pray. Some grab a bite. Yes, a midnight snack in 1380 is a thing. Others sneak out for a quick rendezvous, or lie there thinking about that rude blacksmith who shortchanged you earlier. You might even do chores, turning cheese, checking the bread, shooing foxes away from the henhouse. One medieval husband even described this pause as the perfect time for marital obligations. Romantic, right? Wife, I'm wide awake and it's 1A. Let's get theological. Sevens. There's a theory that the modern 8-hour stretch of sleep is unnatural, born out of the industrial age and harsh work schedules. Before electric lighting, humans might have been wired for 2 sleep sessions, split by a calm, almost meditative window of waking rest. You don't need coffee, you need first sleep. Of course, not everyone did this. In cities, where curfews and danger crept through the alleys, night might be filled with tension. Guards walk past with lanterns, shouting the hour, warning of thieves, or just yelling to stay awake themselves. And yet, in countryside homes, there's a gentler vibe. You wake up in the dark silence, feel the still air, and maybe notice a sliver of moonlight cutting through a gap in the shutters. You think about saints or sins, or maybe the bread you forgot to cover. It's weirdly cosy. Historians still argue whether segmented sleep was universal or just typical of certain classes or climates. Some say it was driven by the natural rhythms of candlelight and firelight. Once the flame dies, your body obeys. Others think it varied wildly depending on culture, latitude, and whether your roof leaked. What we do know is, this split sleep pattern shows up in surprising places. Ancient Chinese texts mention it. So do African tribal societies. And in 17th century England, people even advised each other not to speak too much during the in-between time. It might attract demons. Yep, demons. Always the life of the party. One fringe theory, barely whispered among scholars, is that this wakeful break was seen as sacred. That the hours between first and second sleep weren't a nuisance, but a portal. You're half dreaming, half aware. Some claimed visions came more clearly then, that ancestors spoke, or that bodies were more open to strange visitations. Sleepwalking? Maybe. Possession? Occasionally. Weird glow-in-the-dark frogs? Probably not, but I can't promise. You try to fall back asleep, eventually. curling tighter under your woolen blanket, listening to your cousin's nasal snore 3 inches from your face. You wish it were summer and sleep comes easier, but it's late October. Your feet are cold. You wonder if the pigs are still breathing outside, and if not, who's going to tell father? Your body sags again. The second sleep begins. Deeper this time, dream-rich. If you're lucky, the sun won't wake you too soon. If you're not, a rooster might scream into your window around dawn. Sleep in the medieval world isn't just a necessity. It's a rhythm, a ritual, a luxury, and sometimes a curse. And tonight, you've only just begun to explore the twisted tangle of how and where people used to rest. You shift under the scratchy wool, eyes fluttering open to the low stench of unwashed feet and something sourer, maybe turnips gone bad, or maybe your uncle. In medieval homes, especially peasant cottages, bedrooms aren't rooms at all. They're corners, nooks, a bit of floor by the hearth if you're lucky, or up in the loft if you're small and nimble. You didn't pick your bedmates. You inherited them. Your mattress is a sack of straw. Lumpy, possibly mouldy, definitely not hypoallergenic. If you're wealthier, you've got a feather bed. If not, you sleep straight on a board, maybe with a layer of dried rushes. Those are just swamp grass, by the way, occasionally swapped out if someone remembers. Sheets? If they exist, they're linen and rarely washed. Blankets are wool, maybe fur-lined if your family has status, and the whole bundle is probably crawling with bedbugs, fleas, and whatever else lives in old wood and human sweat. You're never sleeping alone. Most people shared beds, out of necessity, not love. Children pack in like firewood. Parents sleep fully dressed, because undressing in winter risks frostbite. Sometimes servants lie at your feet, warming them. And then there are the animals. Chickens roost in baskets beside the fire. Dogs curl against your legs. Even pigs sleep nearby, their body heat useful in winter. Ever slept with livestock? It's warm, sure, but they snore, grunt, and occasionally step on you. Sleep is a full contact sport. Let's talk about chamber pots. They're right there, next to the bed. Easy access when nature calls at 3 a. But not great for the air quality. In richer households, you might have a night commode with a lid. In a poorer home, it's a cracked pot. If you're too groggy or just lazy, the corner of the room becomes an emergency latrine. That smell? Not the turnips after all. What about privacy? Not a thing. You dream under the eyes of parents, cousins, even passing neighbours if the door's open. Walls are thin. Curtains. Only in castles. Maybe. And even then, they're decorative more than soundproof. Want to cry yourself to sleep? Everyone's going to hear it. We tend to think of the past as prudish, but in the medieval night, bodies and boundaries blur. Someone rolls over, an arm flops across your chest. You grunt. They grunt. Life goes on. People didn't talk much about this lack of privacy, because it was normal. And honestly, it made people a little more chill. Or maybe just resigned. Weird side note. There were actual bed hierarchies. In noble houses, the order of who slept where said everything about your rank. The lord and lady got the bed, obviously. Others lay on benches, rugs, or the floor. In monasteries, monks had individual cells, if they were lucky, but often just shared long dormitories, lined up like cordwood. No talking, no snoring either, ideally. Historians still argue whether peasant homes were as cramped as often portrayed. Some archaeological digs suggest more space than expected. Others point to tax records that list entire families living in one-room huts with livestock, tools, and food stores all crammed together. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. But one thing's clear. Beds were communal. Comfort was relative. You shift again. A splinter jabs you. The wood frame creaks, and you wonder, if you're really unlucky tonight, will the whole thing collapse? Medieval bed frames, especially in taverns or on the road, were not paragons of craftsmanship. Rope lattices held up the mattress. These needed regular tightening, or else the whole bed sagged in the middle. Hence the phrase, sleep tight. Yeah, that's where it comes from. Because if the ropes loosen, you fall into the abyss of your cousin's armpit. And now the bugs. Oh, the bugs. Bed bugs were a known issue even then. So were lice and fleas. Occasionally, people sprinkled herbs in the straw to ward them off. Lavender, rosemary, mint. Doesn't always work. Some folks just learn to live with it. Others picked at bites in their sleep, half conscious. In winter, fleas fled the cold to burrow into warm beds. In summer, you lay there itching, sweating, and praying for a breeze. Imagine lying there in the dark, listening to scratching sounds under the bed. Not rats. Not mice. Just someone else on the floor trying to get comfortable. Someone muttering. Someone snoring. You learn to sleep through anything, except maybe your father's dramatic midnight farts, which echo off the thatched roof like thunder. One quirky practice. People sometimes used bed warmers, metal pans filled with hot coals, slid between the sheets. Sounds cosy, right? Except they also scorched sheets and occasionally set the bed on fire. Nothing like falling asleep to the soft glow of potential combustion. In fancier homes, beds were canopy style with thick curtains. These weren't romantic drapes, they were insulation. Drawing the curtains kept in heat, blocked drafts, and muffled sounds. Rich people still shared beds, though, especially when travelling. Even kings bunked with courtiers or ambassadors, not for intimacy, but for warmth, security, and sometimes diplomacy. Nothing says let's trust each other like snuggling under the same blanket. So here you are, tangled in itchy linens, surrounded by half a dozen sleepers. The air is heavy with human smells and animal breath. Your little brother kicks in his sleep. Someone whispers nonsense. Outside, an owl hoots. You feel the bed shift as someone gets up. Chamber pot run. You don't want to know more. You roll over, trying not to think about the bugs, or the splinters, or the pig that snorted in its sleep and scared your aunt. Just another night in a bed that's more crowded than restful. You stretch your legs, or try to. Someone's foot is in the way, and the blanket barely reaches your ankles. The hearth's gone cold. You shiver and wonder if you should have layered more, or less. Because what you wear to bed in the medieval world is surprisingly complicated and kind of gross. Let's start with the basics. Nightshirts. Simple linen shifts, loose-fitting and long. Think tunic meets potato sack, but itchier. Most people, especially in colder climates, slept in some kind of underlayer. Men wore long shirts, women, chemises. If you were rich, these were clean and embroidered. If you were poor, they were patched, yellowed, and definitely not changed often. Laundry was laborious. Soap was layered and ashes. If your sleepwear made it through the winter with only a few suspicious stains, you were winning. But not everyone bothered. Some folks slept naked. Yep, birthday suit. Especially in summer or in more private quarters. It wasn't scandalous. It was practical. One 15th century French noble famously insisted on sleeping naked for health reasons, claiming it allowed the body to breathe. That sounds nice, until you remember the fleas, and the pigs, and the cold. Want to get even weirder? Some people slathered themselves in goose fat before bed. Not just for fun. Goose fat, or pig lard, was believed to insulate the body and treat everything from arthritis to skin infections. Picture this. It's January. You're wearing nothing but a sheen of fat, and you slide into a bed stuffed with straw and insects. Romantic, no? There were other odd nighttime habits too. Wool socks were a big deal. Feet get cold, and there's nothing worse than waking up with frozen toes. Wealthier folk had fur-lined slippers or even night shoes to keep their feet warm during midnight walks to the privy. You, unfortunately, have a pair of rag-wrapped hooves that stink faintly of sheep. For women, bedtime attire had some built-in risk. In certain periods, sleeping without a head covering was said to invite illness or demonic possession. Hair was considered spiritually vulnerable at night. So many women wrapped their heads in cloth caps before sleeping. Did it help? Hard to say, but at least it caught lice. Speaking of sleep hygiene, there basically isn't any. Baths were rare, especially in winter. If you're lucky, you've rinsed your feet in a bucket before crawling in. Most people didn't wash before bed. Toothbrushing wasn't standard, and perfumes were for the rich or the particularly rank. One fringe practice among upper-class women: sprinkling rosewater or dried petals into their sheets. Not just for scent, but to ward off bad humours thought to cause illness. Historians still argue whether these were sincere health measures or just status flexes. Either way, if you smell vaguely floral tonight, you're probably rich, or pretending. Now, let's talk nighttime armour. Belts. Yes, belts. Some superstitious sleepers wore belts to bed, especially with charms or relics attached. These weren't fashion statements, they were protective talismans, meant to ward off evil dreams or the sudden death that so many feared. Imagine being jolted awake by a nightmare, fumbling at your belt like a sleepwalking knight. Then there are the sick. People who are ill or elderly might go to bed fully dressed, boots and all, because getting undressed risks catching your death. That's not paranoia, either. In drafty homes with damp stone floors, one bad chill could mean pneumonia. So you bundle up. Maybe too much. You sweat through the night, but hey, at least you didn't freeze. A weird little fact. Some medieval medical texts suggest wrapping your stomach before bed, like swaddling an adult. It was thought to help digestion and prevent nightmares. Wraps were made from cloth soaked in vinegar, herbs, or wine. How effective? Questionable. But you can't argue with someone who believes wine is medicine. Some monks took this even further. They slept in hair shirts, coarse, scratchy garments worn to cause discomfort and remind them of suffering. Imagine trying to doze off wrapped in what feels like a sack of angry bees. It wasn't about comfort. It was about humility and repentance. And also, sleep deprivation. Children didn't get special PJs either. They wore smaller versions of adult shifts or just slept in their daytime clothes. Babies, if they survived infancy, were tightly swaddled and often slept in boxes, drawers, or by the fire, sometimes literally in the ashes for warmth. You think that's an exaggeration, but the term ash cradle was very real. Nightwear could also be a social marker. Sumptuary laws in some regions restricted who could wear certain fabrics, even in bed. A silk nightgown on a peasant. Illegal. A fur-trimmed cap on a merchant's daughter. Risky. So even your sleep outfit had to follow the rules. And still, the question lingers. What do you actually sleep in tonight? Linen shirt? Nothing? Oiled goose fat and a prayer? Whatever it is, it probably smells like smoke and onions. Your feet itch. Your scalp tingles. You curl up and hope nobody farts under the blanket. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters. Inside, someone coughs in their sleep. You tug the blanket over your head and pretend it's a castle. It's not. It's damp, but it's yours. You wake up face to face with your cousin. His breath smells like turnip ale and regret. You scoot back a little, but there's nowhere to go. Behind you, your younger sister is using your spine as a pillow. Welcome to family bed culture, where personal space is a myth and sleep is a full-on group activity. In the medieval world, you almost never sleep alone unless you're a hermit, a noble, or exiled for stealing bread. The family bed is the standard. Parents, kids, grandparents, servants, and sometimes guests all share the same cramped sleeping area. In peasant homes, It's usually one big bed or just a pile of hay on the floor. And if you're travelling, tavern floors or inn beds mean bunking with strangers who might snore, steal, or worse. Sleeping with your whole household wasn't weird, it was economical. Heating one room was hard enough. You needed the body heat. Fireplaces only warmed a tiny radius, and insulation meant hanging a tapestry or stuffing moss between wall slats. So everyone piled in, even animals. It wasn't just cute, it was survival. Right now, your dog is curled at your feet, twitching in a dream. A chicken clucks softly from a wicker cage near the hearth. You hear someone grinding their teeth, and someone else mumbling nonsense. The symphony of communal sleep. And no one's embarrassed. There's no shame in snoring, drooling, or sleep-talking. You've heard your father curse in Latin in his sleep and your sister sing lullabies to her doll with her eyes closed. People snuggle, kick, sprawl, and deal with it. Privacy, like silence, is a rare luxury. In wealthier households, shared sleeping is still common, but with more rules. Servants might sleep in the same room, but on separate pallets. A lady might have a maid in the bedchamber to help her if she wakes up cold or coughing. And guests are expected to bunk 2 or 3 to a bed, depending on size. There's etiquette. Sure, feet go this way, heads that way, but no one bats an eye. Beds as social space is another thing. In many homes, the bed is more than just for sleep. It's where you eat, nurse, pray, and gossip. Important conversations happen in bed. Sick relatives are visited in bed. Kids crawl in with nightmares and never leave. You might even entertain guests in bed, propped up with pillows, nibbling on cheese while debating taxes or sheep. It's not romantic. It's practical. In castles, nobles might have private bedchambers, but those beds were often occupied by more than just husband and wife. Pages, guards, even favoured pets might curl up nearby. And let's not forget the ever-present bed curtains, which weren't for sexy mystery, but to block drafts and keep in heat. Sometimes you'd close them just to cough in peace. Historians still argue whether this constant togetherness bred closer family bonds or just a permanent case of exhaustion. Some say it encouraged emotional intimacy, families sharing stories, warmth, and dreams. Others point out the stress of zero personal boundaries, especially for women or children stuck between snoring adults. One documented fringe case? A 14th century English innkeeper reportedly charged extra to not share a bed with strangers. People paid it gladly. Imagine crawling into bed after a long day only to find a drunken blacksmith already drooling on your pillow. Hard pass. There were, however, strict sleeping taboos, especially regarding who could share a bed with whom. Brothers and sisters might bunk together as children, but puberty changed that. Servants and masters sharing a bed? Normal in some households, scandalous in others. Gender, class, and reputation mattered, especially when things got complicated. Because yes, awkward things happened. Nighttime gropes, surprise pregnancies, whispered secrets. Court records are littered with accusations involving people sharing a bed and something improper occurring. Some monasteries forbade monks from sleeping more than 2 to a room to discourage temptation. Others simply separated beds with small wooden barriers, not quite privacy, but enough to look the other way. Then there were the sick and dying. You didn't move them to a separate room. They stayed in bed, in the centre of life. Family gathered around, whispered prayers, changed damp cloths, and slept nearby. Death and sleep were neighbours, sometimes sharing the same mattress. One fringe belief said that your dreams could leak into someone else's if you slept too close. A contagious nightmare, if you will. People told stories of waking from a vivid dream only to have their bedmate say, "Wait, you saw the red door too?" Historians can't prove it, but the tales persist. You stir again. Someone is snoring now, deep, rattly, and unignorable. You pull the blanket over your head. A toe digs into your ribs. The fire's out. the dog farts. And you realise, once again, that this is the price of medieval warmth. Cosy, yes. Quiet, never. Sleep is communal, messy, loud, and full of elbows. But in a world where wolves howl outside and chimney smoke is your heating system, you take the warmth where you can get it. The bell tolls in the distance, low and rhythmic, echoing through the stones like a heartbeat. You're not in a thatched cottage tonight. You're in a monastery. And here, sleep doesn't follow comfort. It obeys God's schedule. Welcome to monastic life, where midnight is for prayer, not dreams. You blink awake on a wooden pallet, wrapped in a rough wool blanket that smells faintly of wet stone and old bread. It's pitch dark. Cold breath clouds in the air. Someone coughs quietly. And then, without fuss, the shuffle begins. The abbot doesn't yell. He doesn't need to. The tolling bell is enough. One by one, brothers rise from their beds in near silence. No yawns. No groans. Just creaking wood and rustling robes. You stand, feet bare on icy stone, and pull your habit tighter around you. Welcome to the night office, the sacred, scheduled prayer session that breaks your sleep like clockwork. In most medieval monasteries, sleep is split just like in peasant homes, but not by chance. By design, the monastic rule, especially under St. Benedict, requires it. You go to bed early, sometimes right after sunset, and rise again before midnight. Why? Because holiness doesn't keep bankers' hours. The idea is this. Night is when the soul is most open, the world most silent. So monks pray. In Latin, in unison, half asleep, fully devout. The chants echo off stone walls, ethereal and sombre. You shuffle into the cold chapel, feet whispering on ancient floors. It's dark, lit only by candlelight or moonlight filtering through stained glass. The shadows dance as voices rise, and you're exhausted. Everyone is. But that's part of it. Monastic sleep is not about rest. It's about sacrifice. You deny yourself the full comfort of sleep so you can stay spiritually alert. The goal is discipline, not dreams. Some monks were allowed a short nap later in the day, what you might call a siesta. Others powered through on sheer divine duty. Historians still argue whether these nighttime vigils were healthy or holy madness. Some say they trained the body into strange sleep cycles, building resilience. Others claim they slowly broke people down, leaving them zombie-like and hollow-eyed. Either way, you're awake now, chanting the psalms in a voice cracked by cold air and fatigue. The rhythm is oddly soothing. You don't need to think. Just breathe. Just follow. The words carry you. After the prayers, the monks return to bed, but not all of them. Some stay behind to tend the sick, copy manuscripts, or prepare the early bread. Labour is part of worship, too. You collapse back onto your wooden bunk, your body numb from the chill, your brain fizzing with Latin syllables. Maybe you'll sleep again. Maybe not. The rules vary by order. Benedictines follow one pattern. Cistercians another. Franciscans still another. But the core idea is the same. Sleep is not a luxury. It's a tool. A thing to control, to discipline, to offer up as a kind of holy tax. Some monks even saw sleep as suspicious. Too much, and it invited sloth. Too little, and it bred hallucinations. Walk the line, and let's not pretend monks were immune to sleep struggles. Some secretly snuck naps during long readings. Others scribbled margins with sleepy doodles. One English monk famously wrote, "I am so tired," in the margin of a psalter, right under a psalm about divine wakefulness. You feel him in your soul. There's also a curious fringe belief that monks could control their dreams. Some monastic texts suggest that by strict fasting, prayer, and sleep deprivation, you could receive visions, divine revelations in the form of dreams. but only if your soul was pure. For everyone else, just vivid hallucinations and the occasional demon-faced turnip. Sleepwalking monks were considered a problem, especially in upper-floor dormitories, where one wrong step could send you to your final prayers. Some monasteries chained doors at night, not to keep intruders out, but to keep monks in. Spiritual wanderers were bad enough. Physical ones could break an ankle. You roll over on your bunk, face mashed against rough linen. The chapel still hums with echo. Someone's muttering a prayer in their sleep. A bell tolls again. Lauds. Time to rise. Again. It's relentless. And yet, there's something grounding about it. The structure. The rhythm. You always know where you're supposed to be, even if your body is quietly falling apart. You share everything. Meals, prayers, even dreams. It's isolating, but also deeply communal. Imagine this. You're half awake, your lips mumbling scripture, and outside the stained glass window, the world is black and silent. No carts, no shouting, no firelight. Just stars and wind and the knowledge that everyone else is asleep, except you and God. And it's weirdly beautiful. Not that beauty helps with the sleep deprivation. Your spine aches from the hard bed. Your knees ache from kneeling. But you're part of something. A sacred relay race, passing sleep and wakefulness like torches between prayers. Eventually, dawn creeps in. The candles flicker out. And the world begins again. You've only slept maybe 4 hours total, in fragments. But for a monk, that's plenty. You don't chase dreams. You chase discipline. So you rise. Again. Always again. You blink in the dark, the embers still glowing in the hearth across the room. Everyone else is asleep, or pretending. This is the between time, that mysterious waking stretch between first and second sleep. And depending on where you live, this is the hour of prayer or ghosts. Outside, the world holds its breath. The stars burn cold above the thatched roof, and the only sound is the crackle of ash or maybe the soft rustle of straw as a chicken shifts in its sleep. But inside your mind, things get strange. In the medieval world, midnight isn't just midnight, it's a doorway. And what steps through that doorway depends on your beliefs, your fears, and whether you remember to sprinkle holy water before bed. Some people use this wakeful moment for devotion. You sit up quietly, fumble for the small wooden cross you keep by the bed, and begin to murmur prayers. Not loudly. You don't want to wake your sister. Or the pigs. The darkness is thick and heavy, like damp wool. It presses against your skin, and your voice sounds too loud in your own ears. Others light a stub of candle and read. Or at least try to. Books are rare, but if your household owns a psalter or a book of hours, you might flip through by flickering flame, hoping the wax lasts. These books are full of nighttime prayers, specifically written for sleepless hours. They're soothing, comforting even, assuming you don't accidentally land on a page about hellfire. But not everyone in the medieval night was so pious. Some people used the between-sleep time for chatting, cooking, even sex. Couples whispered together, discussing dreams or making plans. Some snuck into the kitchen to nibble on leftover pottage. This is your one quiet moment before dawn demands work again. You might as well savour it. And then, of course, there are the others. In many regions, this middle-of-the-night hour was feared. It's when the veil between worlds thinned, when the dead stirred, when demons slipped through cracks in the mortar and danced by the firelight. You've probably heard stories, from your grandmother, or the weaver's wife, or the old drunk who swears he saw a pale woman standing at the village well with no eyes. Ghosts love this hour. According to folklore, spirits of the restless dead often appeared during this in-between sleep. That's when they were strongest. Maybe you died unbaptized. Maybe you were buried in cursed ground. Maybe someone forgot to light a candle for your soul. Now you wander, and the living sometimes see you. Your village priest warned you. Don't whistle at night. Don't sleep facing an open door. Don't look too long at moving shadows. And definitely don't answer if someone knocks once, then twice, then says your name. If it's a real person, they'll knock 3 times. Everyone knows that. Some fringe tales even talk about revenants, walking corpses. Not quite zombies, but restless dead who climb out of graves to stalk the living. They're more common during plagues, when death comes too fast and the proper rites get skipped. You might recognise one by the smell, or the dripping, or the fact that it used to be your neighbour. Historians still argue whether these midnight fears were widespread or localised superstitions. Some believe they were rooted in older pagan beliefs, merged awkwardly with Christianity. Others think they were tools of social control. Act up, and we'll say your dead grandmother's watching. Either way, the fear was real. People avoided mirrors at night, kept garlic near the bed, drew protective symbols in the ashes. And then there are the witches. According to folklore, this is their hour too. While you're blinking, sleep from your eyes and sipping cold water, they're out gathering herbs, summoning spirits, or flying through the clouds on broomsticks, goats, or, if you believe one German account, a butter churn. Yes, a butter churn. Magic is weird. If something strange happens in your village, a sick cow, a spoiled batch of ale, a child with fever, it might be blamed on something that occurred during this shadowy hour. She must have been up at midnight, they whisper. I saw a candle in her window. That's all it takes. You're marked. You're watched. Maybe not tonight, but soon. There's a reason they call this time the Devil's Hour in some texts. Not because the devil himself shows up, but because the things you fear the most are allowed to creep in through the cracks. Sleep leaves you vulnerable. Waking in darkness makes you question what's real. And once fear takes root, it doesn't need proof. Just space. A curious fact. Some scholars now believe the between-sleep hour was a time of heightened creativity. People reported vivid dreams, strange ideas, even flashes of inspiration. There's a theory, still debated, that the dreamlike mind during this state made people more open to storytelling, poetry, or insight. Maybe that's why monks wrote their best lines before lords, or why shepherds swore they heard music on the wind. You lie back down. Try to shake the chill that's not entirely from the cold. The fire's just aglow now. You hear nothing but the gentle breaths of the people beside you. Still, your skin crawls. You pull the blanket higher. Close your eyes. A creak from the corner. You tell yourself it's just the wood settling. It usually is, but not always. Your dreams are strange tonight. There's a white stag, glowing faintly in the mist. A crumbling castle. A voice you don't recognise whispering your name. You jolt awake for the second time, heart pounding, breath short, and realise you've had a dream worth telling. In the medieval world, dreams aren't random brain static. They're messages, warnings, clues, sometimes divine, sometimes demonic, but never meaningless. You don't shrug them off like, wow, that was weird. You take them seriously, sometimes dangerously seriously. Back then, people believed dreams came from one of 3 sources: God, the devil, or indigestion. That last one isn't a joke. Medieval doctors often blamed certain foods, beans, cheese, even apples, for causing bad humours that bubbled up into nightmares. Want to avoid dreaming about falling off a tower into a lake of serpents? Maybe skip the roast onions at supper. But if the dream wasn't food-related, that's where things got heavy. Let's say you dream of an angel. Not the fluffy Hallmark kind. A real medieval angel. Towering, glowing, terrifying. That might mean you've been chosen for something. Maybe a warning to change your ways. Or a calling. You tell your priest, who then tells the bishop, and suddenly you're being asked to lead a fast or go on pilgrimage. But not all divine dreams are obvious. Sometimes they're riddles. You see symbols, a snake curled around a book, a well overflowing with blood, your mother holding a candle that won't light. These dreams get analysed, not ignored. Your local priest might know some interpretations. Or you consult the dream books, manuscripts full of symbolic meanings, like an ancient dream dictionary. Some say dreaming of fire means glory. Others say it means death. Good luck. Now, suppose you dream of a black dog with red eyes, or a crow tearing at a corpse, or your neighbour's face, staring blankly through a window. Not good. These are diabolical dreams, and they're to be feared. Not because you're evil, but because something might be after you. And no, you can't just shake it off. You might be marked, you might be cursed, or you might be seeing a future death, your own or someone else's. One fringe belief. If you tell the wrong person about a dream, you give it power. Some people were terrified to speak certain dreams aloud, fearing that voicing them would invite the consequences into reality. So you whisper them to a priest, or write them down, or confess them like sins, because dreams are serious business. You're not alone in this belief. Across Europe, kings consulted dream interpreters. Saints received visions in their sleep. Monks kept dream diaries, carefully recording what they saw between prayers. And in peasant villages, dreams could shape real-world decisions. A farmer might plant early because he dreamed of wolves in the fields. A widow might remarry because her late husband told her to move on in a moonlit dream. Historians still argue whether this dream obsession was superstition or spiritual literacy. Some say medieval people genuinely believed dreams were divine tools. Others suggest it was a way to explain anxiety and trauma, projecting fear into symbolic form. Probably both. Because honestly, if you dream every night of drowning in a frozen lake, something's going on, right? Here's a weird detail. Dream incubation. Some people try to trigger divine dreams on purpose. They'd fast for a day, sleep on church steps, or even lie on relics, hoping for holy visions. A popular spot? The tomb of a saint. You'd camp there overnight and pray that the saint would visit you in your dreams. And sometimes they did. Or you hallucinated. Same thing. But dream culture wasn't just religious, it was social. Sharing dreams could bond people, or doom them. Say you and your friend both dream of the same wolf. Now you're linked. Maybe it's fate. Maybe it's prophecy. Or maybe it means you both ate the same sketchy venison. Children's dreams were especially watched. Some parents believed a recurring nightmare meant a child was sensitive to spirits. These kids were protected, prayed over, or occasionally feared. Because sensitivity could go both ways. Divine or cursed. One case in a 13th century village involved a girl who dreamt of fire every night. The villagers believed she was seeing the future. When the mill caught fire a week later, they were convinced. She became a local legend. Until, of course, someone blamed her for the fire, and she had to be moved. The line between visionary and witch was razor thin. And here's a joke that isn't a joke. Medieval dream interpreters had totally contradictory rules. Dreaming of water? Peaceful birth, unless the water is muddy, then it's betrayal. The dog? Loyalty, unless it bites, then it's sin. Dream of flying? Good. Falling? Bad. Flying while falling? Better hope you're not naked. You lie back down, unsettled. That white stag felt too real. You didn't just see it, you felt it. The air around it. The way it stared at you. You wonder if it means something. Or if it's just your brain making soup out of goat cheese and candle smoke. But something inside you says, remember it. Write it down. Tell someone tomorrow. Or don't. Because dreams are doors, and not all doors should be opened. You can't move. You're awake, or you think you are, but your body is frozen, limbs stiff as timber, breath shallow. and something is sitting on your chest, heavy, cold, watching. This is no dream. This is sleep paralysis, and in medieval Europe, it comes with fangs, claws, and sometimes hooves. Tonight, you've met the night hag. You're not alone. For centuries, people across cultures describe this exact experience. Waking suddenly in the dark, completely unable to move, heart thudding, eyes straining against the dark, and feeling a presence, often on the chest, sometimes whispering, sometimes choking. The medieval explanation. Demons. Evil spirits. Sometimes witches. Always bad news. Right now, in your half-frozen state, you think you can make out a shape. A woman, maybe. Bent, thin, wiry fingers curled on your collarbone. You try to scream, but your mouth won't obey. This moment, between sleep and waking, is where the monsters live. In Old English, she was called the mare, which gave us the word nightmare. In Scandinavian folklore, she's a dark elf or cursed woman. In other regions, she's a demonic cat or a succubus. Across cultures, the features shift, but the story stays the same. You're asleep, vulnerable, and something comes to steal your breath. In the 12th century, a monk named Gervase of Tilbury wrote about a creature that presses down on sleeping people and prevents speech or movement. He called it a nocturnal oppressor. Medieval doctors gave it the Latin name incubus, from incubare, meaning to lie upon. And yes, this is where the term for sex demons comes from, because that's the disturbing fringe detail here. These entities weren't always just scary, they were seductive. The incubus, male, and succubus, female, were believed to enter bedrooms at night, usually through windows or cracks in the wall, and force themselves onto sleeping victims. Sometimes to torment, sometimes to impregnate, sometimes to steal the soul right out of the body. It's not just folklore. Entire sections of medieval medical texts and religious tracts are dedicated to dealing with nocturnal demons. Prayer was the most common remedy, particularly invoking St. Michael, patron of protection. Some people sprinkled blessed salt around the bed. Others slept with iron knives under their pillows, not for fighting, but for protection. Iron was thought to repel spirits. If you had frequent attacks, your neighbours might start to whisper. Were you cursed? Possessed? Or, more dangerously, consorting with demons? That's when things got serious. A young woman with too many night terrors could find herself accused of witchcraft. A man with recurring paralysis might be thought to have invited evil through sinful behaviour. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed in physical demons, or if this was just a way to explain neurological sleep phenomena they couldn't understand. Some scholars point out that the descriptions of sleep paralysis match modern reports almost exactly. Waking immobility, hallucinations, pressure on the chest. But others argue the vivid supernatural overlay, demons, hags, shadows, is more than just metaphor. It was a cultural truth, lived and feared. One fringe theory suggests that chronic sleep disturbances were sometimes interpreted as divine punishment. Had you skipped prayer? Lied? Lusted? That could open the door to night attacks. Medieval people didn't separate spiritual and physical the way we do. Everything was connected. A bad dream could mean a guilty conscience. A paralysed night could mean God was warning you, or the devil was already in. There's also the role of herbs and amulets. Mugwort, vervain, and rue were common in bedtime sachets to ward off evil. Some people even hung dried wolf tongues above the bed. Effective? Debatable? But it probably made burglars think twice. In one documented case from 15th century Germany, a man reported nightly visits from a shadowy female figure. He claimed she whispered Latin spells and drained his energy. The local priest tried an exorcism. The man still suffered. Eventually, he moved out of his home and claimed the spirit stayed behind. The new tenants didn't last long either. And it wasn't just peasants or lunatics. Charlemagne supposedly suffered nighttime visions so vivid, he commissioned special relics to be placed in his bedroom. A ring containing a piece of the true cross, a vial of holy oil, and 2 guards posted just outside, tasked with checking on him every hour. Back to you. Your chest is still heavy, but the pressure is fading. You can wiggle your fingers. Your breath returns in a rush. The room feels normal again. Cold, silent, real. You stare at the ceiling. Was it just a dream? Your muscles say no. Your pounding heart says no. Something happened. You just don't know what. You reach for the candle stub, light it with shaking hands, and whisper a quick pater noster. Just in case. Because whatever that was, it wasn't just in your head. You're still shaky from whatever that thing was last night. Shadow, hag, demon, draft. But you can't dwell. Because while you're trying to catch a few hours of second sleep, the town is stirring in its own shadowy way. Not everyone sleeps through the night in medieval times. Some people go to work. You roll over and hear it. A distant clang. Then boots on cobblestone. Then the low call. 1 o'clock, and all is well. That's the night watchman, part alarm system, part deterrent, part amateur bard. He's patrolling the streets, swinging a lantern and a club, watching for burglars, fires, drunks, and the occasional body floating face down in the moat. His job is to keep peace after dark. But let's be honest, he's half asleep, scared of shadows, and might be more likely to shout for help than actually step into trouble. Still, he's out there, bundled in a cloak, muttering about curfews and staring at windows he's sure weren't open earlier. And he's not alone. Night in the medieval town is alive, with movement, whispers, mischief. Thieves love the hours between first and second sleep. Doors are unlocked. Candles are out. And most people are too groggy to defend themselves. That's why some families sleep with their valuables under the mattress, or, more commonly, under their heads. Thieves in this era aren't always poor or desperate. Some are organised, trained to lift keys, pick locks, or even scale walls like medieval ninjas. And the punishment if caught? Let's just say it's not a slap on the wrist. You might lose an ear, or a hand, or get displayed in a metal cage until the crows lose interest. But crime isn't your only nighttime concern. There are fire hazards, drunken brawls, and accidental falls into canals. Candlelight plus alcohol plus medieval wood construction equals one terrifying reality. Entire blocks burning to the ground while people are still asleep. That's why watchmen often carry buckets and sound alarms with horns if they smell smoke. Still, not everyone out at night is a criminal or a guard. Some are lovers sneaking away. Some are midwives called in a hurry. And some are herbalists, women with baskets and cloaks, slipping out to gather night-blooming plants or brew remedies, or so they say. A few are doing something else. You don't ask. Nighttime is dangerous not just physically, but socially. Suspicion breeds in the dark. If you're seen out after curfew, questions follow. What were you doing? With whom? And why didn't you tell the parish priest? Historians still argue whether towns enforced night curfews strictly, or used them more like guidelines. Some cities, like Paris and London, had bells that rang at sunset, signalling everyone to douse lights and stay indoors. Others just left it to the watchman's discretion and hoped for the best. In some places, people lit their windows with a candle to ward off evil or signal to travellers. In others, showing a light at night meant you were up to no good. Context was everything. One family might be praying, another might be hiding something. Let's not forget the taverns, still buzzing well after midnight. These are more than pubs, they're town hubs, gossip centres, and dens of every kind of deal. A night in a medieval tavern can mean beer, dice games, illicit meetings, and the occasional knife fight. You might hear songs. You might hear sobbing. You might wake up in the stable next to a goat that isn't yours. There's one more kind of night person we can't skip. The baker. That smell that just started to waft in? That's him. Up hours before dawn, kneading dough by torchlight, shaping loaves while the rest of the town dreams about falling teeth and horned beasts. Medieval bread ovens run hot and early, and bakers are some of the only people allowed to be out legally during those hours. Thank them next time you bite into crusty rye. And then there are the fringe types. The rat catchers, prowling with sticks and terriers. The grave diggers, working by lantern. The occasional travelling stranger who claims he was just passing through, even though no cartwheel turns on these streets after sunset. You pull the blanket tighter. The sounds are fading. Fewer footsteps now. No more clanging. The town is sliding back into silence. But the night isn't gone. Not yet. Just outside, someone coughs. You wonder, are they drunk? Sick? Hiding? You'll never know. Because in the medieval night, you stay inside. You wait for daylight to tell you if the fire started, or the baker vanished, or the hag returned. Then you try one more time to sleep. You finally drift back into sleep, only to wake up again, this time not from a demon or the town crier, but your stomach grumbling like a plague cart wheel. That boiled barley mush didn't last. It's not even dawn, and you're starving. So what do? In the medieval world, the answer is simple. You eat something. Yes, midnight snacking is a medieval tradition. And not just for greedy nobles or insomniac bakers. Even peasants, when they could, reached for a little something between first and second sleep. But this isn't your modern midnight fridge raid. There's no leftover pizza, no secret stash of chocolate, no glowing microwave. There's a pot, still warm beside the fire, and if you're lucky, someone remembered to cover it. Tonight's snack, maybe a spoonful of onion pottage, or a hunk of dense rye bread with cold goose fat, or, and you swear this is true, a bowl of snail soup. Yes, snails. High in protein, low in fuss. Easy to gather, especially after rain. And, weirdly enough, considered a delicacy in some regions. Don't knock it till you try it. Midnight meals weren't just about hunger. They were often remedies, too. Medieval doctors believed certain foods helped with sleep, and certain ones caused nightmares. Lettuce, for example, was a big winner. Thought to cool the humours and calm the brain. Lettuce tea? Absolutely a thing. So is soaking your feet in a warm leek broth, though that's more of a side dish for your toes. On the more questionable end of the menu, dormouse broth. Yep, tiny rodents boiled with herbs and salt, believed to help you sleep soundly and wake with clear eyes. There are texts that recommend dried dormouse powder mixed with honey. Historians still argue whether this was real medicine or just a high-stakes prank on insomniacs. For the wealthy, late-night indulgence was serious business. Some noble households employed night stewards specifically tasked with preparing light meals and warm drinks for their lords during the between-sleep hours. We're talking sweetened wine, small pies, and, if you're in the right place at the right time, a candied almond rolled in rosewater. In monasteries, eating at night was usually forbidden, but exceptions were made for the ill, or the very old, or anyone with a sensitive constitution, which is monk speak for Brother Thomas can't make it from vespers to matins without fainting. So they were allowed small portions of bread soaked in wine or thin porridge, administered, of course, with much spiritual side-eye. One strange belief that pops up in herbal texts. Eating eels before bed causes prophetic dreams. Why? No one knows. But there are records of people deliberately consuming eel pies before big decisions, hoping for divine insight between snores. Imagine dreaming of your cousin wearing a fish crown and thinking, "Ah yes, I'll buy that cow now." Of course, not everyone had access to this weird, dreamy buffet. For many, a midnight snack was just a survival tactic. You'd break off a bit of yesterday's bread, chew it slowly to make it feel like more, and sip cold water, or ale, depending on the kitchen rules, Some even sucked on dried fruit pebbles, tiny preserved berries that stored well and made your breath smell slightly less like cabbage. There were also folk remedies passed down through grandmothers and herbalists. Roasted apples stuffed with cloves to soothe the belly, warm beer mixed with an egg to calm nerves, or a mixture of goat milk and crushed mint for night sweats. Does it work? No idea. But if your choices are that or lying awake listening to your uncle's snore moan, you'll try anything. Some fringe households believed in sleep-enhancing cakes, small doughy buns made with poppy seeds and honey. They were eaten just before bed or during the night wake-up, especially by people prone to restlessness. The poppy part? Yeah, that's opium adjacent. So maybe those cakes worked a little too well. And let's not forget the role of rituals. Certain foods weren't just eaten, they were blessed. You might whisper a prayer over your bread crust, or mark it with a cross before biting. Not because you're holy, because you're scared of sickness, of demons, of choking alone in the dark while everyone else dreams about angels with swords. You sip from a wooden mug, ale, thin and slightly sour. You tear a bite from the bread, cold and stiff but edible. The fire's almost out, but the coals glow just enough to light your hands. Around you, people shift in their sleep. A child murmurs. The pig lets out a dreamy grunt. You feel better. Just a bit. In a world with no sleep science, no melatonin gummies, no lavender diffusers, this is what you have. Food. Ritual. Belief. A hot brick at your feet and a slice of onion pie. And somehow, it works. Your stomach settles. Your eyelids droop. You lie down again, full enough. Not happy, exactly, but ready. You wake to the pale grey light of dawn squeezing in through wooden shutters. Someone's already up, clomping around, probably your father. A pot clanks. A rooster screams. And you roll over, briefly, gratefully, stretching under the blanket. You're still warm, miraculously. That's because you're one of the lucky few tonight. You're not in a hayloft or a tavern corner. You've slept in a private bedroom, a rare medieval luxury that most people never experience unless they're noble, rich, or very sneaky. Private sleeping quarters? Almost unheard of among peasants and labourers. A single shared space for everything. Eating, sleeping, arguing, birthing, dying. That's the norm. But in the manor houses, townhouses, and castles of the elite, things get a little more exclusive. Your bed last night wasn't a pile of rushes or a rope-strung cot. It was a four-poster canopy bed, tall and carved, draped with thick curtains to block out cold and noise, and, let's be real, nosy servants. The mattress? Feather-stuffed. The linens? Actually laundered. There's even a little wool-stuffed pillow, not shaped like a sad beanbag. You slept alone, too, or with a spouse, or possibly a visiting courtier, but not 7 relatives and a pig. This space, this chamber, is yours, and it's not just a bedroom. It's your power zone. If you're a noble, this is where you dress, plan, receive visitors, write letters, and sometimes pass quiet judgment on your enemies while sipping spiced wine in a silk robe. The bed is the throne of your private kingdom. There's a good chance your room is up high. Privacy was a matter of elevation. The higher you slept, the more status you had. Ground floor rooms were for servants and animals. The upper floors, cooler in summer, warmer in winter, were reserved for those who mattered. And those tapestries on the walls, not just for show. They act as insulation, dampening the chill from cold stone walls and giving the room a cosier, quieter feel. If you're truly wealthy, your chamber might be decorated with painted panels, imported carpets, and a side table with a candlestick shaped like a lion eating a bishop. Tasteful. Historians still debate how often nobles actually used their private rooms for sleep. Some evidence suggests they often still had others present, maids, guards, trusted companions. Total solitude was rare, even at the top, but at least they had separation. A curtain. A door. A little breathing room. In castles, these sleeping chambers were called solas, from the Latin for sun. Often built to catch daylight, they became the quiet retreats of lords and ladies. Still draughty, still echoey, but quieter than the great hall and better than snoring next to a footman with garlic breath. There's another layer to noble sleeping. Security. Bedrooms were sometimes positioned in hard-to-reach parts of a keep, or fortified with iron-barred doors, especially in times of unrest. A nobleman could retire knowing someone had to go through 3 guards and 2 angry mastiffs to assassinate him in his sleep. Comforting, in a blood-soaked medieval sort of way. Of course, not all private rooms were comfortable. In winter, even the wealthiest chambers were freezing. Fires in the hearth helped, but smoke was a problem. Chimneys weren't common until later centuries, so the room might fill with fumes. You'd have to choose heat or breathing. Some nobles burned charcoal braziers, which gave off heat with less smoke, but also carbon monoxide. There are documented cases of people dying in their sleep from bad air. Historians are still unsure whether they understood what was happening or just blamed evil spirits again. And then there's the servant's mattress. Even in a private room, you often weren't entirely alone. A maid might sleep on a trundle bed tucked beneath your own. A valet might sleep on a bench nearby. You weren't meant to interact, unless you needed something. A drink. A cloak. A candle relit. Privacy wasn't about being alone. It was about having control over who stayed near you. That was the real luxury. Let's not forget symbolism. A noble's bed was often a political statement. Painted headboards, heraldic crests, expensive fabrics. Hosting a visiting dignitary? Offer them your best bedchamber, and make sure the pillows smell of lavender, not damp linen. Marriages were often publicly consummated, at least in part. Witnesses weren't in the bed, thankfully, but they stood nearby, ensuring the union was completed. No pressure. On a more personal level, private beds became places for strategic intimacy. Husbands and wives plotted alliances, courtiers whispered rumours, lovers arranged trysts, all while lying under embroidered covers, pretending to rest. In this space, secrets were born, and sometimes conceived. One weird fringe fact: some noble households had portable beds, foldable frames, collapsible canopies, even travelling bed linens. When on campaign or visiting another estate, you didn't trust their mattresses. You brought your own. Imagine showing up at your cousin's house with a 4-poster bed strapped to an ox cart like, "Don't mind me, just hate your rush-stuffed flea sack." 7s. Tonight, you were lucky. You slept in warmth, alone, without a pig nudging your ribs. You woke to gentle sunlight and the muffled hum of servants starting the day. But don't get too comfortable. Even the nicest bed can't keep out what's coming next. You slip into a chair near the hearth after breakfast. Bread, cheese, and something pretending to be ale, and your eyes start to droop. Not again, you think. But it's not just exhaustion from your broken night's sleep. This, right now, is expected. Encouraged, even. Because in the medieval world, if you're rich, well-fed, and decently lazy, it's time for a nap. Yes, the midday nap wasn't just tolerated, it was respected, especially among the nobility. Falling asleep after your morning duties wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a status move. You nap because you can. You lie down, not in your main bed, but maybe on a cushioned bench, a curtained alcove, or a soft rug in a sun-warmed corner. You loosen your belt, draw the shutters halfway closed, and let the light drift across your eyelids like a lazy cloud. The day slows. The servants know not to disturb you. This is sacred time. Among nobles, this was called a nooning or meridiana, the midday rest. Monks had their version too, known as the 6th hour. typically after the noon prayer. Even farmers, if their work allowed, snuck in brief stretches of shut-eye beneath trees, in barns, or next to field walls. And let's be real, if you've been up since dawn, walking behind a plough, you've earned it. There's one important difference, though. Napping wasn't a free-for-all. It had rules. Sleep too long, and you're courting sloth, one of the 7 deadlies. Sleep too short, and you wake up groggy, grumpy, and confused about why your sheep are eating your lunch. The sweet spot. About 1 hour, enough to cool the blood and reset the body without falling into sinful excess. That's right, naps had moral implications. The church viewed excessive daytime sleep with suspicion. Laziness was a gateway to temptation. Too much rest made you soft, indulgent, prone to lust or gluttony. There are sermons that rail against those who recline in pillows while the poor labour beneath the sun. So the trick was to nap just enough to function, but not so much you offended God. To help with this, some monks and clerics used timed candles, tall wax sticks marked with hours. You'd light one and nap, waking when it burned to a certain point. Others relied on servants to wake them, or trained themselves to nap in a specific posture, head resting on hand, so they'd jerk awake when they slumped. That's not just smart, that's nap-foo. Historians still argue whether the midday nap was a continuation of segmented sleep patterns or a cultural response to long, exhausting days. Likely both. In regions with hotter climates, it also made practical sense. Break during the heat, work again in the cool evening. In Northern Europe, the nap served more as a bridge between meagre meals and never-ending chores. In noble circles, naps weren't always solitary. Afternoon rest could be flirtation in disguise. Picture this. You and a visiting guest resting in the solar. A little wine between you, curtains half drawn, a shared cushion. Did you fall asleep? Maybe. Did you wake up with your hand somewhere it shouldn't be? Definitely. And now the chambermaid has questions. One odd practice among the elite. Nap attire. Yes, special clothes just for napping. Looser tunics, softer caps, lighter robes. Not quite pyjamas, not quite day wear. Just enough to signal, I'm resting, not lazy. These garments were sometimes perfumed or embroidered, because nothing says power like a gold-threaded nap cloak. But let's not forget the performance aspect. Napping in public, or at least semi-public, was a way to show you weren't in a rush. A nap was a flex. I'm important enough that people can wait. I'll sign that charter after my rest. Meanwhile, your scribe sits stiffly outside, nibbling dry bread and wondering how long it takes to sleep off a goose dinner. The lower classes, of course, had a more practical approach. If there was time and space, you took it. A nap on a warm stone wall, a snooze in the back of a wagon. You didn't always have the luxury, but when you did, it was delicious and dangerous. More than one shepherd woke up to find his flock had wandered off, or been eaten. Some fringe beliefs warned against napping during certain times, like twilight or right after church. Sleeping too close to dusk was thought to open the soul to spirits. One bizarre account from Wales warns of a man who napped in the late afternoon and dreamed he married a goat. He woke up unable to speak for 3 days. Coincidence? Or divine punishment for hitting snooze? Let's not forget the snore factor. Napping in communal spaces meant people heard everything. Nobles who snored too loudly were mocked in poems. One Italian lord was known for snoring so hard it shook goblets off tables. He claimed it was a sign of virile lungs. His wife, reportedly, slept in another wing. You, however, are a quiet napper. You pull your cloak up, stretch out on a sun-warmed bench, and close your eyes. The world fades. Somewhere in the distance, someone is sharpening a scythe. A bell tolls lazily. A bee hums by. For now, nothing matters. Not the crops, not the gossip, not the rising stench of the chamber pot behind the screen. It's nap time. And in the medieval world, that means you're winning. You wake from your nap with a stiff neck and the unmistakable taste of wool in your mouth. Not because you were chewing your blanket, probably, but because you're on the road now, and the definition of bed just took a medieval nosedive. Travel in the Middle Ages? It's exhausting, dangerous, and deeply unglamorous. And when it's time to sleep, you don't check into a cosy little inn with complimentary soap and goosefeather pillows. You roll the dice. Sometimes you get a hayloft. Sometimes you get a lice pit. Let's say you're a merchant, travelling from York to London. You've got a cart full of cloth and a pouch of silver. The roads are muddy, the forest full of bandits, and you're 10 miles from the nearest anything when the sun starts to dip. That means you need shelter, fast. Option 1. A wayside inn. These are scattered along busy trade routes, offering food, fire, and a place to rest. But don't picture a tidy Tudor-style building with flowers in the window. Picture a drafty timber barn that smells like ox sweat and spilled ale. You walk in and get hit with a wall of smells. Smoke, spilled meat stew, wet cloaks, and someone's very public digestion. You pay for a bed, but that doesn't mean you get your own. Most travellers bunk together. 2, 3, even 4 to a bed. Feet to head, if you're lucky. Sharing space with strangers means you might wake up next to a noble, a drunk knight, or a guy who snores like a dragon gargling gravel. There's no room service. There might be no rooms. Just one long hall with rough bunks, piles of straw, and one shared chamber pot sloshing in the corner. Better hope you're not a light sleeper, or that you don't mind being robbed in your sleep. Because yes, theft in inns was common, especially from travelling companions who seemed friendly until your coin pouch vanished. Don't trust anyone who offers to watch your things. That's medieval for, please thank me for stealing your boots. 7s. Option 2. The barn. If the inn's full, or you're broke, you might ask a farmer for shelter. Sometimes, they'll let you sleep in the barn. It's warmer than you'd expect. Animals breathe a lot of heat, but it's also full of fleas, beetles, and hay that stabs you in the ear every 5 minutes. Still, it's better than the woods. Sleeping among animals wasn't considered strange. In fact, it was normal for travellers. You curl up next to a cow. She farts. You adjust. She licks your foot. You reconsider all your life choices. Option 3. The open road. Worst case scenario, you're camping under the stars. Which sounds lovely until you realise you're lying on damp moss, wrapped in a cloak that barely keeps out the dew, with wolves howling in the distance and 0 snacks. You might build a fire, if you remembered flint. You might get sleep, if you don't freeze. But mostly, you lie there blinking into the dark, listening for the sound of footsteps that aren't yours. And don't forget, travel equals risk. You're outside your village. Your protection. Maybe a hired guard. Maybe a dagger. Maybe just your wits. One wrong inn, one shady stable boy, and you're the starring role in a cautionary tale. One fringe story from France involves a traveller who claimed he woke up sewn into a pigskin sack by prankster innkeepers and tossed into a river. Whether it actually happened or not, it became a warning. Never trust anyone who laughs too much while handing you ale. Now, if you're wealthy, things improve. A noble on the road doesn't stay at an inn unless absolutely necessary. You rely on hospitality networks, friends, allies, lords who owe you a favour. You arrive with a letter, a crest, and several dusty servants. You're welcomed, fed, and offered a guest bed. And here's the kicker. Sometimes you bring your own. Travelling beds were real. Portable wooden frames, foldable mattresses. You roll into a manor, and your men assemble your bed in a borrowed solar like it's a royal IKEA set. Want to really flex? Bring your own sheets. Embroidered, scented, cleaned by your laundress twice a month. You're not about to lie in some sweaty bishop's leftovers. You're a baroness, not a barbarian. There's a rare fringe group of travellers who went even harder. Pilgrims. Sleep for them was a spiritual challenge. On the road to Canterbury or Santiago de Compostela, they'd bunk in hostels, monasteries, or just under the stars, often crowded together with lice, strangers, and that one guy who insists on chanting psalms at 3 a.m. Sevens. You sleep where you can. You pray not to die in your sleep. And if you wake up with all your belongings intact, that's a miracle. Back to you. Tonight, you're tucked in the corner of a tavern loft. 3 other travellers lie nearby. One snores. One talks in his sleep about carrots. The other just stares at the ceiling like he's waiting for something worse. You wrap your cloak tighter. You've stuffed your coin pouch down your shirt. And under your head, you're sleeping on your boots. Not for comfort, for safety. You jolt awake again. This time, it's not the snoring or the rats scrabbling behind the tavern wall. It's your own body betraying you. You can't move. Your chest is tight, and your eyes are wide open. Again. And this time, when the shape appears in the rafters, you don't think hag or demon. You think, witch. Because in this village, people talk. And they're quick to blame night disturbances on witchcraft, especially when someone wakes paralysed or screaming. You're not just having sleep issues anymore. You're in danger of becoming evidence in a full-blown witch panic. In the medieval mindset, bad sleep could mean bad magic. Nightmares, paralysis, vivid dreams, insomnia. Any of these could be interpreted as signs that you'd been ridden by a witch, cursed in your bed, or visited by something that wasn't human. This belief wasn't fringe. It was baked into village culture, whispered from bedsides and confessed in dark corners of the church. One popular story, the witch's ride. The idea that witches could summon spirits or go themselves in the night to sit upon a sleeping victim's chest and ride them like a beast of burden. The victim would wake sore, exhausted, gasping for air, and sometimes bruised. Sound familiar? That's right. It's just another form of sleep paralysis, but in a world without neurology, the blame had to go somewhere. And guess who usually took the blame? Women. Especially women who lived alone, or brewed their own herbs, or had the nerve to be over 40 and still breathe. If someone had trouble sleeping, if a child woke screaming night after night, the village started to look sideways at the widow near the woods, the one who keeps bees, the one who doesn't go to church enough. One German account from the late 15th century tells of a boy who claimed he saw a cat on his chest during a nightmare. He said it talked to him. The next day, his mother, yes, his own mother, was accused of witchcraft. The cat was said to be her familiar. She denied everything, but still, she disappeared. Some say she ran. Others say she didn't. Historians still argue whether sleep-related witch accusations were widespread or isolated. Some believe these stories were tools, ways to control difficult people or explain unexplainable suffering. Others say they reveal genuine fear, a culture obsessed with spiritual invasion, where even your own bed couldn't be trusted. And then there's the dream confessions, people who swore under torture or pressure that they dreamed they flew with witches, or danced with the devil. Were these actual dreams? Or half-remembered nightmares twisted under duress? We'll never know. But in some courts, a dream alone could land you in shackles. Imagine waking from a terrifying dream, heart pounding, only to find a priest staring at you, asking if you'd seen her. You don't even know who her is, but your neighbour's already been arrested. The fear ran deep. Even sleepwalkers weren't safe. One girl in Normandy was said to rise each night and glide silently out of the house. Her parents, fearing possession, tied her to the bed. When that failed, they called in a priest. The girl claimed she didn't remember a thing, but the neighbours whispered, "Which child?" And don't forget the protective charms. People would hammer iron nails into door frames, scatter salt across the threshold, hang herbs above the bed. St. John's wort, in particular, was considered excellent for warding off witchcraft and for calming dreams. If you didn't have any, you might sleep with a Bible under your pillow or tuck a piece of bread in your shirt. Holy bread, of course. Regular bread just got mouldy. Some went further, sleeping with a knife under the pillow, sharp side up. The idea was, if a witch tried to ride you or steal your soul, she'd cut herself on the blade. Risky? Sure, but not as risky as being caught defenceless when the shadows came. Tonight, you lie in the loft, stiff with fear. Your chest still aches from the weight of whatever that was. The man 2 pallets over is muttering in his sleep. Something about flames. You wonder if he'll be the next one accused, or if someone saw you tossing and moaning last night, and you are now on the list. There's no medical vocabulary for what you're feeling, no diagnosis, no sleep study, just panic and blame. You close your eyes and pray, not for sleep, for survival, because in this world, a bad dream might cost you your life. You sit at the edge of the bed, if you can call this splintered board with a sack of straw a bed, head in hands, heart pounding. You didn't dream of witches or demons this time. You dreamed of something worse. Sin. Not murder. Not theft. Something far more scandalous in this world of piety and paranoia. You dreamed of touching. Of longing. Of the blacksmith's daughter and her laugh. Or maybe it was your cousin Squire. Doesn't matter. Either way, you've committed what the priest would call a sin of sleep. Sevens. In the medieval imagination, your dreams are not private. They are spiritual battlegrounds, where angels and demons wrestle for your soul. And if you succumb, even in sleep, it's counted against you. That means lustful dreams. Not harmless. They're dangerous. Corrupting. Proof you've opened your heart and body to temptation. Welcome to the dark world of sleep sins. First up, pollution. That's what they called nocturnal emissions. For men, this was seen as deeply shameful, especially if the dream involved anything impure. You were expected to confess it, in full detail. Some priests even kept ledgers of repeated offenders. If you told the confessor you dreamed of a nun, you'd be fasting for a week. Dream of Satan disguised as your neighbour's wife. Get ready for cold baths and no supper. Women, of course, weren't spared. A woman who admitted to unseemly dreams could face not just penance, but suspicion. Was she a temptress? A witch in disguise? Did she invite the devil into her thoughts? Historians still argue how seriously these confessions were taken, especially since many came under pressure. But one thing is clear. Medieval dreams were not safe places, and it wasn't just lust. Oversleeping itself was considered a sin. Sloth, one of the infamous 7 deadlies, was associated with lying in bed too long, especially after dawn. Monks wrote lengthy tracts warning against the softness of the mattress and the temptations of late rising. One friar claimed that he who lingers in bed past the rooster's call invites the devil to join him beneath the sheets. Cosy. You try to ignore the creeping shame as you remember the dream. It felt good at the time. Too good. And now, in the cool morning air, it clings like soot. You wonder, should you tell someone? A priest? A friend? Or pretend it never happened and just pray harder tonight? That was the medieval answer. Pray more. Confess. Repent. Beg for forgiveness, even if it wasn't your fault. Even if the dream came uninvited. Because nothing in this world, not even sleep, is free of scrutiny. Some took it further. Certain ascetic monks wore spiked belts under their robes to stay alert even in sleep. Others denied themselves blankets or pillows, believing that discomfort would prevent sinful dreams. Spoiler, it didn't. There were also purification rituals. Cold water poured over the head. Vigils spent kneeling on stone floors. One monastic rule even required a young monk to sleep upright, propped against a wall with ropes, so his body wouldn't stir with temptation. That monk died early, probably from spine problems, or just sheer exhaustion. A fringe belief even warned against certain moon phases, claiming that the full moon inflamed the passions and made sinful dreams more likely. Some people covered their windows with heavy cloth during lunar peaks. Others just prayed extra hard during lustful moons. 7s. Of course, not all sleep sins were sexual. There was also anger in dreams, considered dangerous. If you dreamed of cursing someone, hurting them, even yelling, some priests saw this as a reflection of your true soul. You'd be asked to confess, apologise, and possibly do penance. Dreamt you struck your brother? Better help him with the firewood today. And then there's dream pride. Yes, that's a thing. If you dreamed of being a king, or being praised, or having crowds cheer your name, that was vanity in disguise. Even in your dreams, you were supposed to stay humble. Arrogance, even unconscious, was a sin to be scrubbed. Let's not forget the poor confessor who had to listen to all this. Priests in the Middle Ages weren't just spiritual guides, they were dream interpreters, moral auditors, and part-time therapists. They'd listen to sleep confessions and try to determine if it was demonic, digestive, or just deeply embarrassing. Some took it seriously. Others used it to control behaviour. Stop talking to that girl or the devil will return tonight. 7 in, and still, you lie there, unsure. The fire's out. The tavern is quiet. Your breath fogs in the early morning air. You feel stained, like the dream left a mark. You whisper a prayer. It's short, tired, but maybe enough. Because you know what comes next. Confession day. Everyone goes. Everyone kneels. And you'll have to decide, do you tell the truth, or keep your sins between you and the silence of your bed? You shuffle through the tavern in the dark, careful not to knock into the low beams or kick the snoring merchant by the hearth. Your foot hits a cold pot, and you freeze. Was that loud? You squint through the murk, looking for a candle. Your fingers find the stub. Your flint strikes once, twice, and 7s. There it is. A tiny flame. Flickering. Dangerous. Alive. In your world, fire is everything, and in the dead of night, it is both saviour and threat. Because while candles, hearths, and torches light your way through medieval darkness, they also burn down entire villages in the blink of a sleepy eye. Most people sleep with some kind of flame nearby. The hearth smoulders low in the centre of the room, throwing a faint red glow across the floor. Wealthier homes might have tallow candles beside the bed, cheap, greasy, smelly, made from rendered animal fat. A few lucky ones burn beeswax candles, which are cleaner, sweeter smelling, and ridiculously expensive. Like, keep them locked in a box expensive. But here's the thing. You never feel totally safe with an open flame inches from straw, linens, wooden beams, and your hair. Medieval beds were flammable masterpieces. Wooden frames, feather mattresses, wool blankets, linen sheets, all ready to turn to ash if you knocked over your candle while swatting a flea. There's no fire brigade, no fire alarms, no insurance. If your house catches fire, that's it. It's over. Your home, your stuff, maybe your livestock and maybe your family. In fact, fire at night is so risky that many towns enforce strict laws about lighting after dark. Some cities, like London and Paris, had curfews that weren't just about staying indoors, they were about putting out flames. When the bell rang, everyone was expected to cover the fire, literally. That's where the word curfew comes from. Couvre-feu, cover fire. 7s. If you didn't, you risked fines. Or worse, being blamed for the blaze if something happened. Because when the fire starts, everyone looks for someone to blame. And if your neighbour heard you clattering around with a candle after curfew, that's all it takes. In some towns, night watchmen were tasked with sniffing for smoke. No joke. If they saw light in a window after hours, they might knock on your door, ask what you were doing, or just toss a bucket of water inside for good measure. Overkill? Maybe. But if you'd ever seen 10 houses burn in a chain reaction, you'd get it. Historians still debate whether medieval people were careless with fire or just unlucky. The buildings didn't help. Homes were packed close together, walls made of timber and wattle and daub, roofs covered in thatch, dried straw that practically invites combustion. A single flying ember from your chimney could land on your neighbour's roof and set the whole row ablaze. That's why some wealthier homes started switching to tile or slate roofing. Not just for status, but for survival. You stare at your candle. It's already tilting in its iron holder. The tallow's dripping onto the table. You try to move it to a stone shelf, safer, out of the wind, but the wax spills, and your sleeve brushes the flame. For a half second, you panic. You pat it out. No harm done. This time, some people refuse to sleep with a candle at all. They let the fire in the hearth die naturally, then wrap themselves in total darkness. Safer, sure, but scarier too. When there's no light, the night becomes thicker. Sound travels further. The unknown presses closer. That's why many people took the risk. Candlelight was comfort. It made the monsters stay away. It made the nightmares seem softer. Even just watching the flame flicker gave the illusion that someone, or something, was standing watch. Some believed that a flame could protect you spiritually, that demons wouldn't enter a room with a candle burning. That light attracted angels, or at least kept the shadows honest. People even blessed their candles, especially during Candlemas or other holy days, believing consecrated wax burned cleaner, safer, holier. Others carried charm lanterns, small, crude boxes with sacred images inside and holes poked for light. They'd leave them burning by the bed to ward off evil spirits. Did it work? Who knows? But when you've woken paralysed and breathless with a phantom sitting on your chest, you'll try anything. Fringe practice alert. Some people mixed herbs into their candles, sage, lavender, rosemary, not for the scent, but for the supposed magical properties. A candle infused with a rue was believed to keep witches at bay. Another, laced with mint, was said to soothe restless children. And if you needed to summon a dream, light a mugwort candle and whisper a prayer, just be careful not to burn down your blanket. Back in the tavern, the flame is getting lower. It gutters, wavers, and finally fizzles out, casting your palate into darkness once more. You're lying there now, heartbeat slowing, nose full of melted tallow and smoke. Somewhere, someone stirs. Maybe relighting their own candle. Maybe just dreaming. You curl onto your side, eyes wide, praying this night ends without sparks. Because in a world of wood, straw, and wool, sevens, fire doesn't need much to feast. You wake up coughing, throat dry, head pounding. The smoke from last night's hearth has lingered in the rafters, and your back is bent from sleeping on what's basically a burlap sack full of knives. You sit up, dizzy, and wonder, not for the first time, if you're dying. But don't worry. Help is here. You hear a knock on the tavern door. It creaks open, and in walks a man in a long robe, smelling faintly of herbs and sweat. Around his neck hangs a leather pouch full of dried leaves, and in his hand, a stick. He says he's a doctor. That's a strong word in the Middle Ages, because medieval medicine is a strange stew of ancient science, superstition, and vibes. And when it comes to sleep, the prescriptions get weird. Let's start with the good news. Medieval physicians actually understood that sleep was important. Unlike some modern hustle culture maniacs, they believed rest was vital to health. Sleep was when the body rebalanced, when humours calmed, when wounds healed. A good night's sleep could cure headaches, fever, and even melancholy. You just had to get the right kind of sleep. And that meant balancing your four humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Too much heat? You couldn't sleep. Too much cold? You'd sleep too much. The doctor pulls out a chart and stares at your face for a long time. Then he says, with terrifying confidence, that your liver is overactive. Probably from all the barley ale. Or sin. So he prescribes what all the top doctors of the age do. A nap. And not just any nap. A structured, supervised, humour-balancing nap. He tells you to lie on your right side, never your left, because that compresses the heart. Your head must be slightly elevated. Your feet should be warm, wrapped in linen soaked in vinegar and rose water. He also recommends sleeping with a small onion in your pillow, because obviously, this isn't even the weird part yet. If your sleep is too restless, he suggests letting blood. That's right. A quick slice to the forearm, drain a few ounces of life out, and voila, your dreams are calmer. Some believed bad dreams were caused by excessive vapours in the blood. Others just liked stabbing people a little. Still can't sleep? Try his favourite cure. Opium mixed with wine and crushed pearls. Rich? That's your go-to nightcap. Poor? You get warm milk with poppy seeds, or beer brewed with valerian root. Either way, the goal is the same. Knock you out long enough to forget the fleas. Historians still argue whether medieval sleep cures actually helped, or just shortened life expectancy. Some treatments, herbal tinctures, warm baths, fasting before bed, make sense. Others, like wrapping your neck in goose intestine or whispering prayers into a dead man's ear, feel more like performance art. One bizarre fringe prescription from a 13th century Italian medical text recommends placing a lizard under your mattress to absorb bad dreams. It must be alive. And you mustn't tell anyone it's there. No, we don't know why. Yes, someone probably woke up with it in their hair. Doctors also warned against certain foods before bed. Cheese, red meat, and onions were believed to excite the humours. But lettuce, boiled apples, and warm almond milk? Perfect. Combine those with a hot bath and you're halfway to scent-level slumber. You ask the doctor if you should bathe. He scoffs. Not unless you want to catch a chill and die. Medieval physicians were deeply suspicious of water. It opened the pores. It let in night air, which was believed to be dangerous. If you must bathe, do it before sundown, and only if your humours are stable. For the spiritually inclined, there were scent-based sleep cures. Pray to St. Dymphna for peaceful rest, or wear a relic of St. Benedict around your neck. Some slept with blessed bread under their pillows. Others tied prayers to their bedposts. Sleep wasn't just about health, it was about morality. Because remember, sleeping too much, sloth. Sleeping with lustful thoughts, sin. Sleeping through church bells, punishable, but sleeping properly, in the right posture, after confession, on a fasted stomach was considered virtuous. Holy, even. Back to the doctor. He's rooting around in his pouch now, pulling out something squishy. He hands you a paste to rub on your chest. It smells like burnt mint and wet dog. This will calm your dreams, he says. You try not to gag as he smears it onto your skin with 2 fingers and an enthusiastic nod. And then, of course, he charges you. Not in coin, those are for nobility. He'll take a chicken, or a promise, or maybe just your boots, which look warmer than his. You hesitate. He stares. You give up the boots. As he leaves, he reminds you. No wine tonight. No meat. No bad thoughts. Say 3 prayers, sleep facing east, and definitely don't let the candle burn too long. You lie back down, barefoot now, chest sticky, nose full of mystery herbs. You try to relax. You think of saints and onions, and maybe, just maybe, you'll sleep without seeing your own funeral again. Maybe. You wake with a start, Not from a nightmare this time, but from the sound of voices outside the window. Low, tense. Someone says a name. A woman's name. Then there's silence. You press your face against the shutter's crack. A flicker of torchlight. A murmur of prayer. And just for a moment, the crowd shifts, and you see her. Old Marta, the herb woman, the one who hasn't slept through the night in years. Tonight, the village isn't calling her wise. They're calling her witch, because in the medieval world, a woman who doesn't sleep right is a problem. Whether she rises too early, roams at night, or speaks of dreams that came too true, she's walking a line, one that can burn. Let's start with the basics. Sleep is political. Who sleeps when, how long, and with whom are all questions of social control. And no one's under the microscope more than women, especially those who live alone, or speak up, or stay up after curfew. And if they're seen walking through the village in the blue hours before dawn, that's all it takes. She's not normal, someone whispers. She was up last night. Sevens. She doesn't sleep. Another says, what's she doing in the dark? Sevens. The implications are clear. In a culture that prizes modesty, order, and obedience, a woman whose sleep habits don't fit the mould becomes suspicious. Let's say you're a widow. No husband to contain your schedule. You stay up late boiling herbs. You mutter prayers no one else understands. You burn juniper to purify your room, and you wake often to light a candle and whisper to a saint. All of this is completely logical to you. But to the neighbours, you're up to something. Historians still debate how widespread this association between women's sleep and witchcraft truly was. But in dozens of trial transcripts, sleep comes up again and again. She was seen awake at midnight. She never rests. She wanders by moonlight. It's not what you do, it's when you do it. One case from Flanders details a midwife accused of spiritual interference after being spotted 3 nights in a row walking between homes during unclean hours. She claimed she was checking on sick children. The court decided she was calling demons. Sevens? And insomnia? Forget it. Chronic sleeplessness in men was a medical issue. In women, it was often treated as a moral failing, or worse, as evidence of possession. Night-waking women were thought to be spiritually vulnerable, or actively dangerous. One fringe belief held that women who didn't sleep properly were open to the devil's whisper. That's why so many confessional manuals warned priests to ask about dreams, about nightly habits, about unusual energy after dark. Sevens. There's even medical suspicion. Medieval physicians warned that women's sleep was governed by moist humours, and when disrupted, those humours became unstable, leading to hysteria, disorder, even demonic visitation. Sound familiar? It's not just misogyny. It's institutionalised sleep shaming. You lie back down now, eyes wide. The room is quiet again, but you can still hear your own heart pounding. You think of Marta, the way she always had peppermint in her apron, the way she sat up by the fire, whispering to herself when the rest of you had gone to bed. Was she dangerous? Or just awake when others weren't? It's not always women on trial. Sometimes women do the accusing. Jealousy, grief, fear. They're sharp-edged at night. One mother loses a child to fever. Another complains of night terrors. And if a neighbour woman says she dreamed of your face in the fire, you might be dragged to court before sunrise. Sleep was supposed to be contained. Private. Predictable. A good woman went to bed at a respectable hour, didn't talk too much about dreams, and definitely didn't roam in the moonlight. To do otherwise was to stand out, and standing out was dangerous. And let's not forget the devil's hour. For women accused of witchcraft, being awake between midnight and 3 a.m. was damning. That was when they were believed to perform rituals, make pacts, ride out on broomsticks or inside animals. Yes, inside animals. and return just before dawn. Tired, wild-eyed, covered in dew and denial. You roll over, burying your face in the blanket. Outside, the torches move on. No screaming. Not yet. But you don't know what tomorrow brings. Maybe she'll be fine. Maybe she'll be gone. One more thing. In a strange reversal, nuns were praised for being awake at night. Their vigils were seen as holy, their insomnia virtuous. The same habits that damned a village woman saved a nun. The difference. Framing. Authority. Protection. It's not about the hour, it's about the permission. You try to sleep now, but your thoughts churn. Maybe you got up too many times last night. Maybe someone noticed. Maybe someone whispered. And as your eyes drift shut, you wonder. Sevens, if you sleep too lightly. Sevens, if you dream too vividly. Sevens, if you wake too often. Sevens, who might be watching? You're awake again, not from fear this time, but from something warm and damp pressed against your feet. You blink, then groan. It's a dog. Not your dog. Just a dog. In the medieval world, animals aren't just outside companions. They're bedmates, heat sources, symbols, nuisances, and sometimes, believe it or not, scientific subjects. Let's talk about who or what you share your bed with. In a peasant cottage, space is limited and warmth is precious. Animals aren't pets in the modern sense, they're workers. Pigs eat scraps and become dinner. Chickens give eggs. Dogs guard the property. But when night falls and frost coats the windows, these same animals might sleep inside. Not in stalls. In your room. Sometimes on your mattress. And that's not weird. It's survival. A pig is basically a space heater with hooves. Curling up next to one? Cosy. Filthy, yes, but cosy. Dogs lie across your feet, chasing away the cold. They might lick your face in the middle of the night or growl in their sleep, but they keep out rats and strangers. Cats, of course, go where they please, on your chest, in your face, or beneath the blankets like a judgmental furnace. Even livestock animals like goats or lambs might spend nights indoors, especially in winter or during lambing season. That bleating sound at midnight? That's normal. Just don't roll over too fast, you might crush a chicken. But for the wealthy, animal sleeping companions take on a different meaning. Noble women kept lapdogs and slept with them deliberately. Little fluffy creatures with names like Shwuyuz or Pearl fed better than most humans. They were accessories of status, symbols of gentleness. Sleep beside one, and you weren't just warm, you were elegant. That yap under the covers? That's prestige barking. One French countess reportedly refused to sleep without her spaniel tucked under her chin. When the dog died, she buried it in its own velvet-lined box. Her husband, by the way, got a pine crate. There's even record of falconers who kept their birds beside them at night, hooded and calm, perched on bedside stands or even glove-wrapped arms. Why? To build trust. To keep them close. And because if you're spending weeks training a raptor to rip the eyes out of foxes, you don't leave it in the barn. Back to you. You're lying next to a mutt that smells like old boots and cabbage. But its body is warm, and the tavern loft is freezing, so you let it stay. Its breathing slows. You match it. Not all animals in beds were invited. Lice and fleas? Constant companions. They nest in straw, hide in seams, and feast while you sleep. Some people dealt with this by sleeping beside dogs or even pigs intentionally. Decoy hosts, they believed, to keep the bugs distracted. Did it work? Unclear, but it's certainly one way to share the itch. One fringe belief even held that sleeping near animals could absorb disease energy, pulling sickness away from your own body. Sick children were sometimes laid beside dogs for this reason. The dog would recover, or die. No one kept track. Which brings us to the weirdest bedtime trend of all, the sleep experiment. That's right. In certain monastic and noble circles, sleep was studied. Not with clipboards and electrodes, more like holy speculation and sketchy notebooks. Monks might record how many hours they slept, what dreams they had, and what they ate beforehand. Some tried different sleeping positions, fasting routines, or night prayer schedules to see how it affected their soul visions. Sevens. There's even mention in one Benedictine letter of a monk who tried to sleep without speaking for a week, believing silence would purify his dreams. He wrote down every image he remembered, until he started seeing faces in the walls. Then he stopped. Another fringe case? A physician in Italy reportedly tracked his patients' dreams by having them sleep in a shared chamber, separated by curtains. Sure, but close enough to compare notes in the morning. He claimed certain herbs produced communal dreaming, where multiple patients reported seeing similar imagery. Scholars now think he was probably just brewing really strong poppy tea. But the most bizarre recorded study involved a noblewoman who kept a rotating lineup of animals in her bed, noting how each one affected her sleep. Cats brought lucid visions. Dogs gave her peaceful rest. The donkey, however, caused heavy darkness and forgetfulness. That's a direct quote. She stopped after the donkey chewed through her mattress. Tonight, you're not experimenting. You're just trying to stay warm. The dog shifts, flops a paw over your leg. It's heavier than you expect. You think of the pigs back home, of the chickens tucked under the bench, of your old horse, who once nuzzled your shoulder as you dozed in the stable. There's something comforting about it. In a world of freezing floors, bad dreams, and fire hazards, a heartbeat beside you is a little miracle. Doesn't matter if it barks. You close your eyes. For now, the dog guards your dreams. And for now, that's enough. The dog's gone when you wake. The straw around you is flattened, damp with early morning chill, and the tavern loft is empty. Below, someone coughs. A bucket splashes. Outside, the bell rings, not for market day. For death, you know that sound. Someone has died in the night. It's not unusual. In the medieval world, death is always just one night's sleep away. Illness creeps silently. Fevers rise in darkness. The line between deep sleep and never waking again. Thin, fragile, terrifying. And everyone knows it. Sleep and death are cousins. You hear it in the language, the long sleep, the black rest, the eternal slumber. It's not metaphor. It's how people understand dying. Not as a drama with thunder and lightning, but as the final act of rest. A quiet inhale that never exhales. A hand that doesn't twitch again. That's why people start preparing early. The old, the sick, the cautious. They sleep with last rites in mind. You walk past the guest chamber. The window's open. Inside, someone's laid out a body. Eyes closed. Hands folded. The sheets have been changed. A candle burns beside the head, soft and low. It's not just tradition. It's a safeguard, a light to guide the soul. Because if the soul gets lost in the dark, it might come back. And not gently. The priest arrives. He blesses the room, sprinkles holy water, mutters Latin. The family whispers, their voices cracked from weeping or fear or both. And you wonder, was it peaceful? Did they simply stop breathing? Or did they struggle? Because not all deaths are quiet. Plague deaths are fast. Violent. You go to sleep with a headache and wake up with boils, black spots, blood in your cough. Then you don't wake up again. People learned not to sleep too close to plague victims. Or at all, if they could help it. Some locked themselves in barns. Others fled entire towns. One physician recommended sleeping upright during outbreaks to keep death vapours from settling in the lungs. Didn't work. In times of plague, entire villages went quiet at night. Not restful quiet. Dreadful quiet. People stopped sharing beds. They laid alone, in silence, listening for coughs, counting the hours, hoping the fever would pass, praying that their second sleep wouldn't become the last. And even in less apocalyptic times, sleep carried risk. A baby, swaddled too tightly, might not wake. An old man, weakened by cold, might drift off and never return. A woman in childbirth might slip into sleep between contractions and slip too far. So they created rituals. Deathbeds were prepared with purpose. Linen cloth soaked in rosewater. Candles set in each corner. A priest, if available. If not, someone saying the Pater Noster over and over, just to fill the space. If the person stirred, they'd be offered a final confession. If not, their hand was held. Their lips anointed. Because you had to die right. And dying in your sleep, that was the goal. Peaceful. Painless. A good death. But you also had to be ready. That's why people slept in clean clothes. Why they sometimes confessed before bed. Why a child might be taught to say, "If I should die before I wake," before they even knew what the words meant. You go to bed in the medieval world knowing this might be it. That the candle might gutter out, the fire might burn too low, and the morning might come without you in it. Some people feared dying unshriven, without confession. So they kept prayer beads beside the bed, recited the rosary until sleep took them. Not to be pious, to be safe. Because if you died in sin, you didn't rest. You wandered. You haunted. And no one wanted that. The woman who died last night, they say she went peacefully. A fever. Nothing strange. But already, someone's muttering that she walked the halls before dawn. That her eyes opened once, just before she passed. That she said a name, not her husband's. You don't ask questions. You just nod. You head to the tavern's corner and gather your things. You slept here 2 nights. Long enough. Outside, the world is bright again. The bread is baking. The carts are rolling. But part of you stays back in that loft, listening for a breath that never came. Wondering, just a little, how close you came last night. Because in this world, sleep is not a promise. It's a gamble. And you won, again, for now. The fire's almost out now. Just a whisper of warmth left in the stones. You're still heavy. The noise of medieval life, the snoring, the chanting, the clinking of buckets, has faded into memory. What's left is the hush. The soft, humming silence of a world that once never truly slept. Close your eyes. Imagine the faint crackle of a hearth somewhere deep in the dark. The slow breath of someone beside you. The weight of wool on your legs. Straw rustling under your back. You're warm, even if just barely. Safe enough. For now. You've seen the weird, the grim, the surprisingly human sleep habits of another time. You've curled beside pigs, whispered prayers into the dark, listened for footsteps that didn't come. And you've made it through the night, just like they did. One broken, beautiful stretch of sleep at a time. Let your breath slow now. You're not in a monastery, counting psalms. You're not on the tavern floor, clutching your boots like treasure. You're here, quiet, resting. If the dreams come, let them come soft. Let them flicker past like candlelight on wood. Nothing to fear here. No demons. No hags. No watchmen shouting the hour. Only rest. Only stillness. Only the slow drift into sleep, knowing the past can't follow you here. Not tonight. You're safe. You're warm. You're home. Good night. End of script. Sweet dreams,